Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen, wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd, fa'a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Sadaqallahul azim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So today we're on ayah number 94 of Surah Baqarah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل إن كانت لكم الدار الآخرة عند الله خالصة من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين. صدق الله al-Azim. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in this ayah, saying and speaking to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if the home of the hereafter with Allah ta'ala is for you alone and not other people, then wish for death if you should be truthful. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to pose this question to the Bani Israeel. See, Bani Israeel believed that the Akhirah, Jannah, was exclusive to them as the chosen people. They expected themselves to treat with this privilege above all other privileges, that no matter how it was in the life of this world, no matter how bad they were, or no matter how good other people were, in the end, the life of this dunya, when it would end, the Bani Israeel would have Jannah and no one else would have Jannah. No one else would go to Jannah. All other religions, all other beliefs, all other nations, races, societies, communities would not enter Jannah. And only the Bani Israeel would. And to the extent that even if amongst the Bani Israeel there were people who did bad to the non-Bani Israeel or even amongst themselves, even they would go to Jannah, and those who were good amongst the non-Bani Israel, even that they were good to Bani Israel, would still go to hell. So this was the way they saw things, and if there was to be any punishment for them, it would be very slight, a few days in Jahannam, and then they'll be taken out and they'd have the rest of eternity in Jannah. So this is their understanding, and this was their belief. So Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked to pose this question to them. And this was when this was brought before Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Allah Ta'ala responded with this as a logical challenge: ask for death. So that put them to the test, because whilst they were asking for guidance and so forth, and they got the Torah, they had Musa alayhi salam, they had the majority of the Anbiya alayhi salam, and they also felt themselves privileged, they felt themselves that they were the best of people, they felt themselves to the extent, as I mentioned before, that all the prophets came to them. They forgot that there were other prophets that came to other people, which they acknowledged, but that was sort of at the fringe of their minds. The majority of prophets came to them, and so as far as they were concerned, they had all the prophets that were worthy of to speak of. So, as I mentioned previously, this got to a point where they actually felt so such a status within themselves, so privileged, that Allah Ta'ala would never send a prophet to anybody else except to them. And of course, on hearing about the last of the Anbiya alayhi salam, they immediately assumed it was themselves. And so the only issue was that this was the prophet was given to be born and raised in Mecca. So they moved from Jerusalem to Mecca to ensure that he was born amongst them, and that they had to be there for that to happen. So all of these things were within their belief system, to the point that now it came to the Akhirah, that the Akhirah was exclusive to them, nobody else. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala puts this logical challenge to them. If that's the case, that you have the Akhirah, it's exclusive to you, and so much so that this is, the only thing stopping you from getting there is death. Well, why don't you ask for death then? Why don't you do that? And of course, the leaders of Bani Israel had no response to this, and it wasn't something they were willing to do. So the challenge, put their claims and faith to the test. Because you can claim something, but unless and until it's put to the test, and death is the ultimate test of any claim. Any claim that is related to death, when death is brought up, then, or even other claims of, other kinds of beliefs, even love for that matter, death is the test of that. Would you be willing to die for what you believe in or for the one you love? So this is where sincerity, ikhlas, comes in, and that's where they had little to no response, because it wasn't a reality, it wasn't ikhlas. So that's how they felt, and that's how they lived. Now I want to take that portion of their behavior and bring it forward to ourselves today, inshallah, as always, to see where we fit in, inshallah, and what the lessons are for us with respect to this same ayah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل إن كانت لكم الدار الآخرة عند الله خالصة من دون الناس فتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين صدق الله العظيم. So say, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if the home of the hereafter with Allah is for you alone and not other people, then wish for death if you should be truthful. So how does this relate to it? What can we learn? What are the sort of lessons we can derive from this on reflection? So initially, I would like to say that many Muslims, we live in the same sense of delusion as the Bani Israeel at that time. And in particular, those with little knowledge or practice, they live with this sense of delusion. Now, our deen, Islam, requires for every single Muslim man and woman, and including child as well, from the age of learning ability and rationality, to seek the knowledge of the deen. So we are supposed to be continuous on this path. Just as we are continuous on the path of, say, breathing or eating, we should be continuous on the path of learning, that every day something should be learned about the deen, some means should be made that an established practice in our life, such as perhaps attending a class or a circle or reading a book or whatever it is, each person to his or her own circumstances, but something that feeds the mind with deen specifically, so that you're growing in knowledge. It's never, no 2 days are the same. And this can be a little, it can be a lot, it just depends, again, as I say, upon personal circumstances. However, as I said, there are a lot of people who have very little knowledge. They have just the basic rudimentary idea of we should pray 5 times a day, and they'll make whatever prayers they can with the little knowledge that they've picked up at some point in childhood, and never bothered to return to that, to improve or increase that. So their knowledge of even how to pray or make wudu will be very rudimentary. But they understand that, because we're Muslim, that's it. We have this ticket to Jannah because we're Muslim. We've taken the Shahada and we're living our lives out in this dunya, but because we've taken the Shahada, because we're Muslim, Allah Ta'ala will grant us Jannah. So this is similar to the approach of Bani Israeel, that, and many Muslims were exactly like this too. They were also people of little knowledge, but because they consider themselves with the bloodline of Yaqub alayhi salam, the Bani Israeel, then guaranteed Jannah, then it didn't matter if they didn't learn and if they didn't increase or develop themselves over time. So this is not really correct for us, because not only is it, on the one hand, the behavior of Bani Israel, which we should be very careful about copying and emulating their ways, but secondly, we actually have instructions from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanding us, encouraging us to learn, seek the knowledge of the deen, and be continuous with that throughout our lifetime. So a person or persons who are in this state are not in a very good state. Of course, whatever I say here for this group or following groups after that, ultimately, of course, it is the rahmah and wisdom of Allah that He may save any one individual. But that's not the issue here. The issue is what we are responsible for. Okay, what we are responsible for is just like the person who is a murderer or is a prostitute or something like that, which we have hadith about these people, and they are forgiven and they go to Jannah. Now, that doesn't now clarify the way for everybody else to be in the same situation and therefore get the same rewards. No, it doesn't mean that. That is just individual. It shows that Allah can be merciful according to His knowledge, His wisdom, and His mercy as He wishes. But it does not mean that that is a general rule for all of us. The general rule for all of us, and including those people as well, is that we must abide by the Sharia, abide by the conditions and the hukum and guidance of Allah Ta'ala and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where it is expanded upon what Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has taught us. So, in this case, these people with little knowledge or practice, expecting to get to Jannah simply because of being Muslim as opposed to not being Muslim, it is not good enough. In other cases, we have groups that promise salvation. So if you're a particular group or you're a member of a particular group, then that group will tell you, well, we're on the right path. We have the right aqidah, we have the right beliefs, we have the right books, we have the right scholars. And as a result of that, if you are with us, you are saved. And everybody else is on ta-aalaa. Everybody else is astray. And this is Muslims within Muslim groups I'm talking about. So a group of Muslims as opposed to other groups of Muslims. And this is actually the case for practically all the Muslim groups. Each Muslim group believes that it has got what is correct and what is right and what is righteous, and everybody else is somewhere off the mark. So this is a group mentality thing. And again, people who come into this any particular kind of group, that all of these groups for that matter, that have these beliefs, then feels himself or herself comfortable in the fact that, oh, I'm in the right group and I've got the right resources and I'm going to go to Jannah, all because I'm in this group. And so long as I stay in this group and so long as I follow the ways of this group, and in many cases, it simply is a sort of a herd mentality that they're simply following what everybody else is doing, just to be seen as part of the group and therefore expecting to be saved, although they themselves may not even be genuine to the group itself. So this is another case of principally the similar behavior to Bani Israeel. Another case is that of people chasing after dunya, and they're deluded by that. So the dunya takes over their life and they are catering for their families and catering for themselves, but in a dunya sense. For example, the man or the woman, for that matter, who is spending all their wealth on making sure their children have everything. So that they must have cars, they must have houses, they must have phones, they must have wealth, they must have, whatever they need. And the rationale for that is, I'm looking after my children. This is what Allah wants. Allah wants us to look after our children. So my children is my life. My children are my goal. My children are my objective. So long as they're fine and I do everything for them, my life is devoted to them. This is what that person becomes like. And this is not why we're here in this dunya. We're not here to devote our life to our children or parents for that matter. We're here to devote our lives to Allah. All these other matters come under the umbrella of belief in Allah and devotion to Allah. But when one of these things takes priority, then the belief and devotion in Allah becomes displaced, and that is unacceptable. So this chasing after dunya in many cases is like this, and it is unacceptable. But what has happened is the dunya has deluded them. The dunya has deluded them and caught them in its trap of buying and having, but on the pretense of it's for my children, or it's for my family, or it's for my parents, and so on and so on. Some people are captivated, especially some men with their wives, and so what they'll say is that this is for my wife, I want to keep my wife happy, I want to do everything and anything for my wife, etc. So all of this, and that's a love is blind type of situation, that you are blinded to the love of Allah Ta'ala because of the love and passion for a woman, and this is also unacceptable. So all of these cases are again the simple principle of the Bani Israel, that if I do these particular things without realizing the delusion of the dunya, if I do these particular things, I'm guaranteed Jannah. I'm going to go to Jannah because I'm being so good. Okay, I may not pray so much and I may not fast so much, but because I do these things, and these are important things, Allah will forgive me, because He's forgiven people who have committed crimes and they've not prayed, but they've been forgiven for Allah's mercy. So Allah will have that mercy over me too. So this sort of delusion is given to them, and they are on the same principle. Further on to that, we go about our daily lives, generally as people, oblivious to nearing death with each passing moment. And that's another another copy of the principle of the Bani Israeel, that we're busy doing our things, going to work, coming home, being with our families, doing our sports and activities, etc., and very little, if any, attention is given to our deen and our deeni development, our spiritual tazkiyah, and our development of iman, and of course development of knowledge of the deen. And again, we're in that state where we think, well, I'm busy, I'm doing things, they're all good things, I'm not involved in any crimes, I'm not doing anything wrong, I'm just getting on with my life, and as a result of that, I'm going to Jannah. That is also a common internal belief for many people, but it's a rude awakening when we face death, because we realize that our life has been wasted because it has been devoid of actual proper contact with the deen, proper devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not been in place. We've been busy, but we've not been actually accomplishing anything which was substantial. We've been busy in many different things, and our time has been taken up by that. But in reality, it was taken up by things that actually took us away from the things that really mattered. And therefore, we have a rude awakening. Another issue is, for various individuals, is an emotional or mental concern. Now, many of us are driven by emotional or mental concerns that surround us, be it to do with the loss of someone or some psychological problem because of bad treatment at childhood or something like that. So these things are not good. Experiencing the death of a parent or a partner or some other loved one, or experiencing some child abuse, etc. These things are not good, of course. They are evils in themselves. However, if we then become devoted to those things, or we allow those things to cloud our judgment and to overwhelm us, because don't forget, Islam, the Quran, is a shifa, and that shifa is also a shifa for a cure for this sort of thing as well. Now, without going too much into details about that, there needs to be, and there are people who have good knowledge of the deen to whom Muslims should go and speak to, just as in the non-Muslim world, you have counselors, you have psychotherapists, etc. Now, we don't do psychiatry, we don't do those things because those things are based upon false premises, because of the kind of people who are involved as the forefathers of those belief systems. We have the Quran, we have the Hadith. What we do lack, though, is sufficient Muslims, particularly this would be traditionally the role of an imam, a scholar, an alim, an alima, that they should actually learn to do this and become therapists. And in actual fact, an imam or an alim is actually a therapist as well, because they are there to help and encourage the people, and they are there to help lift people out of their depressions and out of their mental and emotional concerns. But I would encourage people to go to Muslims, and they can, inshallah, with dua and tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they can find people who are willing to do this, to be therapists and to listen to people and help them and lift them out of that situation which is psychologically affecting them. And this is important because, of course, we are all human beings and we can be affected by psychological things. Psychology, or the psychological state of the mind, is a reality. It is a truth in Islam. But as I say, the Quran has the shifa, the cure for it. And that is what we use in order to help ourselves lift ourselves out of those depressions that are pegging us down in life and do not allow us to move on. So that's something important, and as a side note and supporting note to what I'm about to say. But for people who are involved in their emotional, psychological problems, mental concerns, and they are not able to move forward, many times they are, and this is actually a little unfair to them as well, but those who are around them often encourage them by saying, don't worry, Allah will forgive you, and Allah will look at your situation, and you've been oppressed, and therefore you are going to get a lot of reward, and Allah responds to the dua of the oppressed, and so on. All of these things are correct, but they're misapplied in this situation. The situation requires for that person to come out of that, to truly recognize the power of the Quran and increase their iman, come out of those states, and then start to progress in life, and then work for Jannah. They are not going to go to Jannah simply because they have been oppressed or they face some kind of abuse, and therefore it's had a psychological effect, and therefore they are classing themselves as oppressed people, and therefore Allah Ta'ala will forgive them, and they have an automatic ticket to Jannah as well. No, because this is again going along, if you think about it carefully, with the principle of what the Bani Israel believed. So this is all incorrect as well. Another issue is when death is mentioned, we are fearful. And that's a reminder to those people who do not want to talk about death, who feel death is depressing, who feel death is bringing the conversation down. And that's a reminder that they are also living in a state of delusion, that thinking that they are going to just automatically, just be on automatic, just be on default and go through life, and they'll end up in Jannah. That's it. That, this is, there are people like that. And the test of that is that when the topic of death is brought up, they don't want to talk about it. Because a person who is truly close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is aware of their deen, will have no fear or no concern or hesitation in talking about death. But the people who do, it shows that you are in, again, a sort of a state of delusion where you're just cruising on automatic pilot, so to speak, and you're on that same belief as the Bani Israel. So some of these things require a bit more thought, I suppose, but in the time that I have, I'm just pointing these things out because a lot of people in the dunya are in this deluded state for the various reasons, some of which I've pointed out and some of which are beyond the time I have for pointing them out. But we are all in different states of delusion, and we need to understand that, and then we need to work ourselves out of that. Alhamdulillah, many people do, and many people are on the path because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us hidayah, guidance. But if we don't even ask for that guidance, if we don't even realize the problem that we have, then that's where we remain in the state that we are in. Then we realize our deluded state and not having prepared for anything for our hereafter. So that's the inevitable end of it all. And the thing that brings us to that conclusion, no matter which of these states we are in, is that core of this particular ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala posing the challenge that if you really think that this is where you are, that the akhirah, the Jannah is exclusive for you, as he said to Bani Israeel, so it applies to us, then wish for death. Now, that doesn't mean becoming suicidal or committing suicide, but in the sense that you are ready to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you are ready to take that step of death, and death is simply seen as that bridge, that stepping stone, and you're going to move on to the next life, and you're happy to go there because you genuinely believe it. And that's the problem here. Many of these states, many of the people in these states, once put to this question, we will not be able to answer it any better than the Bani Israel. Now, as for the lives of those who are truly aware, their lives, they are in complete opposition. They are focused on the akhirah. They are not focused on the dunya. You will not find them in default. You will not find them deluded. You will not find them basing their lives upon somebody else's happiness, a partner, a child, whatever. They won't be like that. All of those things will be in their lives, but they will be put in perspective. They will be put in their proper places, and they will have their limitations as set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, for example, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is known very much for being very, very close to the Sahaba. He's known to be very, very close to his wives and his family. However, when we look at the hadith concerning, for example, Salah, we hear of there's a particular hadith that narrates how the Sahaba were always, they would be very jovial, very, asking how each other is and so on, sitting in the masjid awaiting the Salah. But as soon as the Adhan, as soon as the Salah started, Allahu Akbar Takbir, they would stand and face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, face the Qibla, and it was as if they didn't know each other. Their focus was completely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They forgot about each other. They simply focused on Allah ta'ala, and there was no camaraderie between them anymore, because this is now an example of their devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. in the case of his wives, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he would leave to go to Fajr, or many times even during the night, for just even the Hajj night prayers, there are hadith where it could be somebody like, say, Aisha radiallahu anha. There's one particular hadith where she speaks about where at night she felt that she was alone, that she had gone to sleep, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was next to her, and then she wakes up in the middle of the night or so, and she puts her hand forward to feel the presence of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's not there, and she's feeling around the bed and he's not there, and so she realizes he's missing. So it's dark inside the tent, and she's feeling around, and she touches his foot, his leg, and she realizes he's standing there close to her inside the tent, and he's in prayer. He was in tashahhud, or standing, he was in prayer. So now she hadn't even noticed, but the point is that Rasulullah was able to get up, leave the bedside, go and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be devoted to him. In another hadith, Rasulullah wasn't even in the tent, and Aisha radiallahu anha goes out looking for him and finds him elsewhere near the masjid, in the masjid or outside. He was in another area and he was praying salah, and she actually thought that he'd gone to visit somebody else, maybe another wife, and she hated herself for that. She scolded herself for that, looking at how noble it was that her husband Rasulullah was in this state. Now, that just tells us that Rasulullah, the first and foremost, and then the Sahaba Ikram, they all had this devotion to Allah Ta'ala as a priority. That was their main first priority, and everything else came after that. Of course, there are plenty of hadith talking about how loving and caring Rasulullah was towards his wives, towards his children, towards the Sahaba, etc., etc. So what the lives of those who are truly aware of the Akhirah and how they focus on the Akhirah, how their lives are, is in this manner. First and foremost, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then everything else fits in place. And again, in respect of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put the limitation for it. So from Sahaba to Muttaqi, death is the means to meet the beloved for the one who loves Allah Ta'ala. Their love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. From the Sahaba to Muttaqi, people who can be around today, even in this day and age, there are Muttaqi people, alhamdulillah. Those people of taqwa, to this day, for them, they love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala above and beyond everything. Their priority being with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is such that it's driven by love. And that love overrides the love for the wife or the husband or the child or the parent. It overrides that love, and it doesn't mean that they don't love those other people. Of course they do. However, what it means is that the priority is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The prior love is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then the love for all these other people is within that love, driven by that love. And as a result of it, it has its place and it has its limits, and those limitations are known so that the person does not overstep them and end up living his or her life devoted to a person and having forgotten the devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is how the lives of those who are truly aware of the Akhirah, that's how they live. It is also a test of our yaqeen. For example, Iman. Iman is to believe without seeing, or to trust. That's Iman. Whereas yaqeen is something else. Yaqeen is to act in relation to it as a reality. So yaqeen is, if you like, in English, they are often translated to certainty, whereas Iman is translated to faith, and faith is based upon trust. We trust the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of everything, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will judge us, and so on. We trust this fact, and this is something which in the Quran it's classed as tawakkul. Tawakkul is to put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, that's Iman. Tawakkul stems from Iman. Alhamdulillah, this is fine. However, yaqeen is to actually live your life and conduct yourself with that certainty. Okay, so there was a story which kind of highlights certainty of a day where with Musa alayhi salam and the Bani Israeel, they were in the desert, and they asked Musa alayhi salam, because there was no water, they wanted water in the desert. So they said, we want to, can we make dua, Allah Ta'ala will give us water. So Musa alayhi salam, their Rasul, said, okay, we will do this. We will go to a particular place. He called upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told him to tell the people to go to a particular place and stand there and all make dua together. So they all went to that particular place to make dua all together. And when they did, there was, as they went to that place to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for water, one of the children, and this is a moral story, and I don't know if it's actually from the Jewish traditions, which it probably is, but it's the moral is what's important here. The story recounts that a child from amongst them took what would have been known in those days as an umbrella. He took an umbrella with him. That is certainty. That's yaqeen. That child understood that we are going to make dua and Allah is going to answer it and it's going to rain, and so I'm going to need an umbrella. That's living your life on the basis of yaqeen. That's the principle here in this story that I'd like to highlight. The principle that if you truly believed in Allah Ta'ala with yaqeen, then when you live your life, it will be living your life in that manner that you not just hope or trust, but expect the answer to come. And you will then make your provisions. Like this boy, he took an umbrella because he expected it to rain. So that's an aspect of yaqeen. So the life of and in dunya has no appeal to these people. They live with this yaqeen in the akhirah. So for them, this is just, the life here is temporary. It is all those things that as Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam described, and their yaqeen is such that, for example, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam describe this life as being one where you are a traveler and you live your life like that. So they live like that. So they don't concern themselves with piling with dunya or even giving it to those that they love. No, they're just passing through. So they live on basic necessities, basic needs, which is in Islam, we class that as zuhud. That's how they live, because their focus is on Jannah. That's the resting place, not this dunya. Now, I want to briefly look at a hadith that helps us understand this a little bit better, inshallah. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم من أحب لقاء الله أحب الله لقاءه ومن كره لقاء الله كره الله لقاءه وقلت يا نبي الله أكراهية الموت وكنا نكره الموت فقال ليس كذلك ولكن المؤمن إذا بشر برحمة الله ورضوانه وجنته أحب لقاء الله فأحب الله لقاءه وإن الكافر إذا بشر بعذاب الله وسخطه كره لقاء الله وكره الله لقاءه صدق الرسول. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, whoever loves to meet Allah, Allah loves to meet him. Whoever hates to meet Allah, Allah hates to meet him. I said, Ya Rasulullah, O Prophet of Allah, all of us hate death and are averse to it. The Prophet ﷺ said, it is not like this. Rather, when a believer is given glad tidings of the mercy of Allah, his pleasure and paradise, he loves to meet Allah and Allah loves to meet him. When a disbeliever is given news of punishment by the hand of Allah and hardship to be imposed by him, he hates to meet Allah and Allah hates to meet him. So, some lessons from this hadith. If we believe in Allah Ta'ala, we will act in relation to that whilst in this dunya. And that's what I mean by living yaqeen, living the life of zuhud. If we love Allah Ta'ala, then we will yearn to be in His presence and His Jannah. We will love Him and we want to meet Him. So like two people who love each other from a distance, have been apart, all they want to do is meet each other. And everything they do in everyday life is simply to meet one another, is to take themselves close to getting to meet one another. So that will be how the life of that believer will be. We will also prevent the love of worldly things to enter our hearts to compete with the love for Allah Ta'ala. That's a deep concept. But truly everything you buy, everything you want in this dunya that you go and work for and you have like a house or a car or whatever it is, all of these things, their love for these things starts to enter the heart, and as a result of which the love for Allah diminishes. So the people who truly love Allah, they won't allow anything to compete with that. Just like when two people are sincere and love each other, they will not allow the love of anybody else to enter their hearts. They're just focused on each other. That is the way that people who love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala live their lives in this dunya. Finally, reflection. I want to go to the core of this ayah again, and I want us to reflect upon this. And each one of us may come up with something different. But truly, if this question was posed to us, if Allah Ta'ala poses this question to us, which in effect it actually is, because it's an ayah of the Quran, and we are supposed to reflect on every single ayah of the Quran, then we have to ask ourselves, do we wish for death in order to meet Allah Ta'ala? Do we really? How do we live? Have we ever pondered over this question, pondered over this ayah? And if we truly believe and love Allah Ta'ala, want to be in His Jannah, want to be in His presence, want to meet Him, then do we really wish for death? And again, as I say, not in a suicidal way, not in a depressed way, no, none of that, but in the sense that we therefore remove the love of the dunya in all its different forms, remove that from our hearts, and we remain loyal to Allah Ta'ala with our hearts full of love for Allah Ta'ala, brimming with love for Allah Ta'ala, just as the two people who love each other are at a distance and trying to meet each other. Every day they think about when they will meet each other. Every day they count the day to the day when they're going to actually meet one another. And that's all their focus is. And everything else is just by the by. What they'll do in life, they'll just do just to get by, just for the day when they'll meet each other. That's how we should be living in this world, and that is the response to wishing for death, because to die simply means is a stepping stone. It's like for the two people at a distance, it's like getting on a means of travel, getting on the aeroplane, or getting in a car, or getting on a horse, whatever it is that will convey us to the person you love, to the person you miss, to the person you haven't seen for a long time, to the person you want to be with, to the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. That's what death is. It's just a means, a conveyance that will convey you from this dunya, from the distance, to the nearity, to the proximity, to the closeness of the person you love. So if we love Allah Ta'ala, death is not seen to be something to be afraid of. It is not seen to be something you delay. It is not seen to be something that you're apprehensive about. No, it is simply a means to meet Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, and we would welcome it as the Sahaba welcomed death. They have no problem with it, because to them it was just a passing phase from this dunya to the next, from the distance to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, to the proximity of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, to coming out of being away from Allah Ta'ala, to being in His presence, to come away from life and a place and an environment that would involve and include disobedience to Allah Ta'ala, to a place that meant no more disobedience, pure obedience, pure devotion, pure pleasing Allah Ta'ala, and no more disobedience to Him. This is how they would understand it. This is how real spiritual people would understand the life of this dunya, death, and being in the presence of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. So we have to ask ourselves and redefine for ourselves, do we wish for death in order to meet Allah Ta'ala? May Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala give us tawfiq to understand, inshallah, and to benefit from this. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.